I'm Mark Hensley, 50 now, Elkins, West Virginia. This was late October 2014. Fog sitting in the hollers, wet leaves rotting sweet as cider. I was 39, nights on the county plow when the first frost flirted and the radios sang static. Ordinary, coffee going bitter, my daughter asleep at mama's, porch light burning that weak amber. Then the knocking started. Soft, spaced, like a knuckle on a barn door. 3 times. The sound went through the railing into my arm. I shouldn't be telling this, but it's been years. Folks around here say Bigfoot like they say ghost, with a smile like a bandage. I know what people think. I still have a clip on an old phone, 20 seconds of breath and one word mocked back at me. I won't share it. Wind chimes shivered and, listen, hear that? The tape hiss rises when the memory does. Late October 2014, the edge of Elkins where the paved road crumbles into gravel and the hollers swallow sound. I'm a single dad working night shifts on mountain roads, plowing when the weather turns. The house is a cinder block square with a sagging porch and a humming fridge you can hear from the hallway. Mama kept Lacey those nights. My daughter, 7 then, gap-toothed and serious. I stacked firewood in the failing light. The split logs smelled like green pepper and smoke, sap sticky on my gloves. On the radio, a ranger warned about bears getting into trash cans before hibernation. Then old Wayne at the gas station added his 2 cents. Or maybe that Bigfoot talk starting up again. He laughed, slapping the counter. I rolled my eyes, paid for my coffee, told myself I don't do Bigfoot. Never have. Copper moths battered the porch light that evening. Somewhere up the hill, a dead limb cracked in the damp air and fell through branches I couldn't see. I felt silly, double-checking the back door before bed. Counted the locks. Once, twice. The creek ran high that week, brown as sweet tea, loud enough to cover smaller sounds. I told myself it was just wind moving through the hollow, shifting the shed door on its broken hinge. But the wind paused, the exact second the footsteps paused outside my kitchen window. I set the wood down on the hearth and stood very still, listening to my own breath fog the glass. 3 soft knocks came from the porch rail, deliberate, patient, like someone testing if I was home. I turned on the floodlight. Nothing but wet leaves plastered to the steps and the orange glow catching mist. The dog 2 houses over started barking, then stopped mid-yelp like someone shushed it. I locked the door a 3rd time and didn't sleep well. Morning came ordinary, Lacey's cereal bowl, Mama's car in the driveway, frost burning off the grass by 9. I convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Early November, the county maintenance lot under sodium lights that buzzed like summer cicadas. Gravel crunched under my boots. Diesel fumes hung heavy in the cold air, warm and oily in the nose. Frank from maintenance was checking tire chains, grinning at me over the hood of the backup plow. "Got your Bigfoot chains ready, Mark?" he called out, enjoying himself. I shot back, "I don't believe in Bigfoot." And I meant it like armor, like saying it out loud would keep the foolishness away. A stray dog nosed through burger wrappers near the dumpster. On the ridge above the lot, fog braided through the pine tops, thick and low. In the truck cab, the heater clicked and clicked, trying to catch. The windshield smelled of rubber and Windex. I adjusted the mirrors, checked the salt spreader, did my pre-shift routine like a man who wasn't listening for something he couldn't name. The radio crackled to life. Dispatch first, then the open channel where locals sometimes called in. A woman's voice, nervous and young. Something tall near Gladdy, walking the tree line. Static swallowed the rest. Frank leaned in through my window. "Probably a drunk hunter," he said. I nodded, but my hands were tight on the wheel. The road salt shifted in the spreader like slow surf, a sound I usually found calming. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror as I pulled out onto Route 33, catching only my own headlights bouncing off the fog. I told myself to focus on the job, culverts to check, downed branches to clear, black ice forming where the runoff crosses the asphalt. Then, passing the turnoff to Whitmer, I saw it through the passenger window. A low silhouette against the tree line, motionless, too tall and too still to be a bear standing upright. I slowed to 15 miles an hour. The shape held its position for 5, maybe 6 seconds, then stepped back into the darkness between the trunks. I swallowed hard and looked away, back to the center line, back to the ordinary work of keeping roads clear. My mouth was dry. I didn't tell Frank when I got back to the lot at dawn. Didn't tell Mama when she asked how my shift went. I heard 3 knocks again that night, faint and far off, like someone testing the strength of a post. Mid-November, my kitchen at midnight, yellow light from the fixture over the sink. The kettle hissed on the stove. The clock ticked on the wall. The fridge purred its low animal sigh. Rain stippled the window, streaking cold silver down the glass. I set a basket of Granny Smith apples on the counter. Lacey liked them with a pinch of salt. Strange kid habit she got from her grandmother. Somewhere outside, beyond the porch, a slow footstep mashed through wet leaves. The sound was distinct, heavy, deliberate. The smell came next. Damp earth, wet bark, something alive sneaking under the door like a draft. My neighbor Nora called just then, her voice a whisper like a child caught out of bed. "Mark, you hear that knocking? It's been going on for 10 minutes. Through the phone line, I could hear her porch boards creaking, her breath catching. "Bears," I said, trying to sound certain. "Not Bigfoot." Saying the word out loud made my mouth feel foolish, like admitting I believed in Santa Claus. The porch light flickered once, then again. I reached up and tapped the switch, as if that simple gesture could fix whatever was wrong with the night. Nora stayed on the line, neither of us speaking, just listening to each other listen. I carried the basket of apples to the fridge, then paused. Without thinking, I took 3 back out and set them on the porch rail through the cracked door, just far enough to reach without stepping outside. Habit, I told myself. Gifts for the deer that sometimes nose around at dawn. But deer don't knock, and deer don't make the air smell like the deep forest, miles from any trail. The rain quieted to a fine hiss, the sound of the old tape I keep in the drawer, the one I won't let anyone hear. I stood in my kitchen, hand still on the doorknob, until the kettle went quiet on its own, the flame burning blue and patient beneath it. Nora hung up without saying goodbye. I checked the locks again, 1, 2, 3, and left the apples where I'd set them, lined up like an offering I couldn't name. Morning, the apples were gone. No cores, no animal scat, no drag marks in the frost, just empty rail and 3 wet circles where they'd sat. I heard the knocks again that night, softer this time, almost polite. Late November, a timber road turnout where chainsaw crews had been cutting windfall after the last big storm. The air smelled sharp, gasoline and pine pitch making a kind of church out of the cold gray noon. Mud layered my boots as I walked the shoulder, checking for washouts. Wayne was there with his truck, clearing branches from the ditch. Along the gravel edge, I saw them, prints, big, clean ovals, deeper than any boot I'd ever seen, stepping off the road into the alder thicket. Wayne squinted, spat tobacco juice into the mud. "Guy in boots," he said, not looking at me. "Or maybe you're Bigfoot." He grinned so I wouldn't have to. I knelt in the cold water pooling in the ditch, my knee soaked through instantly. The heel of the print sunk deeper than mine did when I tested my weight beside it. I told myself that mud lies about weight, that water distorts shape, that I was seeing what I wanted to see. But the toes were there, 5 distinct impressions, spread wide for balance. In the hush after the chainsaws cut off, something popped a tree trunk like a knuckle cracking. 1 sharp knock, then another, farther off through the alders. 2, and somewhere below us, down where the creek cuts through the bottom of the hollow, a hollow thud answered. 3. The rhythm was unmistakable, patient, intentional. I took a photo with my phone, the print centered in the frame, a stick laid beside it for scale. Then I stared at the image for 30 seconds and deleted it. I didn't want it to be real in my pocket. Didn't want the weight of proof sitting against my thigh all day. My hands smelled like chain oil and mud the rest of the shift, no matter how many times I wiped them on my jeans. The wind stirred the alder leaves, then went completely still, holding its breath the way I was holding mine. I whispered it, just to hear how the word sounded in the open air. Not Bigfoot. The trees gave nothing back. Wayne climbed into his truck without another word. That night, lying awake, I heard them again. 3 knocks, slow and even, somewhere between the shed and the tree line. I didn't get up to look. First week of December, the first real snow sifting down like ash through the amber cone of the porch light. The air smelled iron cold, like pulling a bucket up from a deep well on a winter morning. Lacey's construction paper turkey, the one she'd made for Thanksgiving, still taped to the kitchen window, fluttered when the furnace kicked on. I'd left 2 apples on the rail the night before. Couldn't say exactly why. Couldn't admit what I hoped would take them. Morning came with the apples gone. No cores, no tooth marks, no scat. The rail was clean, almost wiped. Frank laughed over coffee at the lot. "Fox took 'em, Mark. You know that, right? Not Bigfoot." I nodded, wrapped both hands around the styrofoam cup for warmth, and didn't argue. But that evening, I cleaned the rail with a rag, wiped away the snow and grit, the way you do when you're expecting a guest you can't name. That night, I heard the yard breathe, a slow, damp exhalation that came from somewhere near the woodpile. Not wind. Wind moves through things. This was the sound of lungs, large and patient, deciding whether to come closer. The dog 2 houses down started barking, sharp and afraid, once, twice, then swallowed the 3rd bark like someone had covered its mouth. In the hush that followed, a word drifted back toward the house. Not spoken exactly. Mouthed, shaped in the cold air and returned wrong. Mark. My name, but flattened, careful, like something learning the syllables from listening to Mama call me in for dinner. I know how that sounds. I know what you're thinking. The wind chimes barely moved, hanging still as bones. My tongue went dry. I stood at the window, one hand on the frame, and told myself it was the creek echoing off the tin shed roof, or a trick of distance and cold air. But I've lived here long enough to know what the creek sounds like, and this wasn't it. Then came 2 whoops, low, resonant, stacking on each other, down in the trees past the fence line. The sound rolled through my chest like a drum. I didn't open the door. I stood there until my breath fogged the glass, until the cold soaked through my socks, until the silence became ordinary again. I heard Bigfoot once in a documentary, years before all this. The sound was close to what I heard that night. Mid-December, walking Nora's backfield at blue dusk, our boots squeaking on frosted grass that crunched like styrofoam. Nora's breath made little ghosts in the air. Her scarf smelled like the cedar chest she kept quilts in. We were checking her fence line, looking for the gap where something had been getting through, knocking over her trash cans, leaving her back porch light unscrewed from the socket. At the base of an old stump, we found a deer rib cage, cleaned, not torn. The bones were laid out almost carefully, placed beside the wood like someone had set them there as a marker or a message. Nearby, 3 river stones stacked in a neat column, balanced like a child's careful game. "You're Bigfoot?" Nora said, but her voice was softer now, loaning me the word without the usual mockery. "I don't do Bigfoot," I said, but the word stayed in my mouth, warm and undeniable. The woods went from blue to almost black as we stood there. Something paced us on the walk back, moving parallel through the trees, footfalls slow and heavy, matching our rhythm. Left foot, right foot, keeping time with our fear. The fence wire pinged in the cold, contracting in the dropping temperature. I gripped the post until the rust bit into my palm. "Bear," I said again, like repetition would make it true. A branch flexed somewhere in the darkness, releasing a small cascade of snow that pattered down like hands clapping, faint and far off. The creek swallowed the sound before it could travel further. Nora walked faster. I didn't blame her. When we got back to my place, the 3 apples were back on my rail, unbitten, skins perfect, arranged in a triangle I hadn't made. Nora saw them, saw me see them. Neither of us said anything. She got in her car and locked the doors before starting the engine. I stood on the porch until her taillights disappeared around the bend. Then I brought the apples inside and set them in the windowsill where I could watch them. They stayed there for 3 days, never rotting, never browning. On the 4th morning, they were gone, not taken from outside, but from inside the house. The window was still locked. I checked it twice, running my fingers along the sash, testing the latch. Lacey was at Mama's. I'd been alone all night. The only prints in the morning frost were mine, leading from the door to the truck. I heard the 2 whoops again that week, always at the same time, just after midnight when the house settled and the wind dropped. I stopped saying it wasn't real. You can only lie to yourself so many times before the lie starts costing more than the truth. I started saying Bigfoot in my head, trying the word on like a coat I wasn't sure fit. December 23, 2014, County Road 27 at 2 in the morning, snow hissing under the plow blade like static. The cab smelled like wet wool and burnt coffee, the heater barely keeping up with the cold leaking through the door seals. My headlights caught the freezing fog, turning the air into a soft blue veil that swallowed the road 20 feet ahead. At the switchback above Shaver's Fork, something ran the bank ahead of my truck. Fast, smooth, not sinking into the snow the way a man would. A shadow keeping pace just outside the cone of light, matching my speed, never stumbling. The radio fizzed. Multiple reports of knocking sounds near Bowden. Then a caller's voice, young and frightened, cracked through without the usual laughter. "I'm telling you it's Bigfoot. I saw it cross the road near my mailbox." I said the word out loud to the empty cab just to hear how dumb I sounded. Bigfoot. My voice was small, swallowed by the engine noise and the scrape of the blade. But my chest tightened like I'd said a prayer I wasn't supposed to know, like I'd spoken a name that shouldn't be spoken alone in the dark. The shadow stopped when I stopped. I eased my foot off the gas, letting the truck coast to a halt on the shoulder. My hands shook on the wheel. I rolled the window down a hand's width, and the cold knifed in immediately, sharp and clean. The smell followed. Wet fur, river mud, something alive and old. The scent climbed into the cab and settled, familiar now, like an old coat I'd worn too many times to forget. Then, gentle and deliberate, 3 taps sounded on the guardrail, metal on metal, resonant, spaced exactly like the knocks on my porch. 1, 2, 3. I sat frozen, breath fogging in front of my face, the engine idling rough. The shadow shifted, became slightly more solid against the pale snow, then fell back into the firs without sound. I eased the truck forward, hands slick on the wheel, and finished my route on autopilot. When I got back to the lot at dawn, Frank asked if I'd seen anything strange. I said no. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded and walked away. I sat in the truck for 20 minutes after my shift ended, engine off, watching the sun turn the snow from blue to gold. That evening, the apples were back on my rail, 3 of them arranged in a line. Beside them, a black feather with a white tip, placed carefully across the middle apple like a signature. I brought them all inside. The feather went into a drawer. The apples I left on the kitchen counter, and I didn't throw them away even when they finally started to brown. I heard the 2 whoops again that night, closer than before. December 25th, 2014, late afternoon when the light goes soft. We'd opened presents at Mama's that morning. Lacey got the art kit she wanted, and I got socks and a thermos that didn't leak. By evening, we were back home, the house warm with the furnace running and the TV playing a Christmas special on mute. Lacey fell asleep under the Afghan on the couch, her hair sticking to her cheek. The Christmas tree threw green and red shadows on the wall, dust motes drifting in the colored light. Static whispered from the television where the antenna couldn't quite pull in the channel. Outside, the world was soft and blue with new snow, everything muffled and waiting. I'd stacked 3 apples on the porch rail beside the black feather, leaving them like a receipt for my foolishness, an admission I couldn't quite make out loud. The house ticked as it cooled, the rafters settling, the walls contracting in the cold. I said the word in my head, Bigfoot, and this time it didn't bounce off. It settled into the quiet like a stone dropping into still water. I believed. That was the shift, the moment when pretending became impossible. I stepped out onto the porch in my socks, the boards biting cold through the thin cotton. My breath plumed white. From the tree line not 50 yards away, a shape stood in the not-quite darkness, larger than any story should allow, larger than any animal I'd learned about in school. No details visible, just the world bending around a presence, an absence of stars where something stood breathing. A low rumble rolled between us. Not a threat, more like a throat clearing, a sound that said, "I see you, and I mean no harm." I felt suddenly, strangely protective, the way you feel seeing an injured buck struggle to stand. My chest tightened with something close to grief. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking, and held it up. The porch light hummed. The creek seemed to pause, listening. The shape didn't move, didn't retreat, just stood there, patient as a mountain, while I tried to hold the camera steady. The red recording light blinked on. My thumb was numb on the button. I heard my own breathing, harsh and quick, and beneath it, the slow rhythm of something else breathing, deeper, calmer, unafraid. I didn't speak, didn't call out, just held the phone up like an offering, like a white flag, and let the moment stretch. Then the shape shifted slightly, leaning forward, and the smell of wet bark and moss and something musky, but not foul, washed over the porch. It wasn't a bad smell. It was wild, but clean. Like the forest after rain, like the deepest part of the woods where no one goes. The recording would be 20 seconds long. I didn't know that yet. I just stood there, socks soaking through, and let Bigfoot look at me looking at it. The word fit now. It didn't feel foolish anymore. Same night, 5 minutes later, my legs moving before my brain caught up. I walked to the frost line at the edge of the yard, where my property stops and the forest begins. Slow steps, hands open at my sides, trying to look harmless. The smell intensified, wet bark, green moss, earth, something musky and alive. A hand, I can't quite say that, but an attention reached across the space between us and waited. From the darkness, careful and deliberate, a syllable came back. Flat, practiced, like someone rolling an unfamiliar word around in their mouth. Mark. Not Mark. Mark. The vowel stretched, the consonant softened. No mouth visible in the shadows, only the sound placed like a gift on the cold air, returned to me. I opened my mouth. My voice shook. "Bigfoot," I said quietly, not daring the laugh that would ruin everything, that would break whatever fragile truce we'd stumbled into. "I won't harm you." Stupid words, inadequate, like promising not to hurt a thunderstorm. But I meant them. A soft click answered me, tongue on palate, or something like it. Then 3 knuckles, rapped wood to my left, the sound sharp and close. 1, 2, 3, measured, patient, the rhythm I'd been hearing for weeks. I lifted my phone higher, thumb still pressing the record button. The red light blinked steady. The recording would catch only my breath and the last mark. I didn't know that yet. My knees felt loose, floating, the way you feel in church when you stand up too fast after kneeling. A car tire hissed on the highway, distant and thin, like the sound of ocean waves filtered through miles of cold air. I took a step back, hands still open, palms out. The shape shifted, became slightly more defined, the bulk of it, the height. 7 feet, maybe more, shoulders wide as a doorframe. I couldn't see eyes, couldn't see a face, but I felt the weight of its gaze like a hand pressed to my chest. The porch bulb buzzed louder, struggling against the cold. "I'm recording," I said, holding up the phone. "I won't show anyone, I promise." I don't know if it understood words or tone or just the gesture, but the shape relaxed slightly, the tension easing from its posture. A soft exhalation came from the darkness, relief maybe, or resignation. We stood there, man and Bigfoot, breathing the same cold air. Then it stepped back, the snow crunching under weight I couldn't see, and the forest swallowed it whole. No crashing through brush, no snapping branches, just a smooth retreat into the deeper dark. I stood at the frost line until my feet went numb, until the recording had been stopped for several minutes, until the ordinary night sounds returned. A distant owl, the creak of branches, wind in the eaves. When I finally went inside, Lacey was still asleep. The apples and feather were gone from the porch rail. Dawn on December 26th, hoarfrost glittering gray across everything, turning the world into a study in silver. Birds started late, hesitant, like they knew something had shifted in the night. I walked out barefoot, too impatient for boots, and found the evidence waiting like a gift I didn't deserve. Where we'd faced each other, where I'd stood and where it had stood, the snow had melted into two wide ovals, steam still lifting faintly in the early light. The warmth of our bodies, the weight of our presence, pressed into the earth. On the stump at the edge of the yard, my 3 apples sat rearranged in a tight triangle, skins unbroken, perfect. At the center, placed with care, a single fir cone stood upright like a signature, like a tidy mark of completion. I hate even using the word, but Bigfoot had answered me like a neighbor. Clear, cautious, scared in its own way, still choosing not to run. I felt a weight in my chest I would call pity if I could admit to pitying a legend, to grieving for something that shouldn't exist, but did. My boots, when I finally put them on, creaked in the cold. The smell of damp cottonwood bark clung to my cuffs, soaked into the fabric. I pulled out the old phone and played the recording. In daylight, with coffee brewing and Lacey still asleep upstairs, the mark came out smaller, tinier, less impossible. But it was there, unmistakably there. I listened 3 times, then powered the phone down and put it in a drawer beneath old bills and rubber bands. I didn't want the world to have this. Didn't want to be the man who proved Bigfoot and ruined it. Crows heckled from the ridge, their voices harsh and mocking, as if they knew the joke and I was the punchline. The silence after they flew off was harder to stand than the noise. I picked up the apples, still cool, still firm, and brought them inside. Set them on the counter where I could see them. The fir cone I left on the stump. Some gifts you don't take. That morning, Mama dropped off Lacey and asked if I'd slept. Not much, I said. She looked at me the way mothers do, seeing past the lie into the truth I couldn't speak. You look different, she said. I nodded. She didn't press. Later, alone, I stood at the kitchen sink and said it out loud to my own reflection in the window. I saw Bigfoot. The words felt too big for my mouth, too strange for the ordinary room with its yellow walls and humming fridge. But they fit the memory. They fit the weight I was carrying. I checked the frost line every morning after that for new prints. Found none. The knocking stopped. The whoops went silent. It was over, or paused, or something in between. I'd been seen and acknowledged, and that was enough. The creature had given me a gift I couldn't name and then vanished like smoke, leaving only the story I promised not to tell. January 2015, turning into February, snow deep and then melting into mud. The nights stretched long and the yellow kitchen light became a kind of confessional booth where I sat alone after Lacey went to bed. Insomnia made a home of those hours. The clock's tick was a nail in a floorboard, regular and invasive, measuring out the silence. I kept the old phone in a coffee tin with rubber bands and paid off bills, receipts from the gas station, Lacey's old school photos, hidden but not forgotten. Some nights I'd take it out, hold it in my hand without powering it on, feeling the weight of proof I'd never share. The video was there, 20 seconds of breath and one word. Mark. That's all anyone would hear, and it wouldn't be enough. It would just make me a joke. Lacey asked why we were moving closer to town that spring. I said better schools, shorter commute, closer to Mama. Truth was, I was checking the porch light too many times each night, listening for sounds that didn't belong, jumping at every branch that scraped the siding. The house had become a place of waiting, and I couldn't live in the wait anymore. I say Bigfoot softly now. like a name you whisper at a grave you visit alone. The word has weight. It pulls at something in my chest that won't let go. The furnace sighed one night, then went completely still. No hum, no rattle. In that sudden quiet, a single tap sounded, somewhere deep in the wood of the house, like a knuckle on a joist. Then nothing. Just my breathing, and the refrigerator's low purr starting up again. I made a list of lies I could tell myself. Fox took the apples, raccoon made the knocks, men in boots made the prints, audio glitch on the phone. I wrote them down on the back of an envelope, neat and orderly, trying to convince myself. Then I set the list aside and made coffee instead, standing at the counter until dawn. Outside, frost drew lace patterns on the storm door, intricate and temporary. I didn't open it, didn't step out. The night pressed its forehead to the glass and waited, patient, knowing, not quite gone. I felt watched, but not threatened. Accompanied, maybe. The way you feel when someone you love is in the next room and you don't need to see them to know they're there. We moved in April. The new place had neighbors close enough to hear, streetlights bright enough to push back the dark. Lacey liked it. Mama approved. I slept better mostly. But some nights, when the wind picks up and the house creaks, I hear it. 3 soft knocks, too deliberate to be settling beams, too patient to be random. I don't go to the door anymore. I just listen and think about what it means to have been chosen for a secret I can't share, a truth I can't prove, a Bigfoot encounter that changed nothing and everything all at once. Spring 2016, sitting on Nora's porch with rain cutting gray threads through the afternoon. We drank coffee that tasted like smoke from her old percolator, watching the storm churn the yard into soft mud. She had a woven basket on the porch table, a 4th grade art project her boy had made years before, holding 3 smooth river stones he'd collected. "You and your Bigfoot stories," she said, but there wasn't meanness in it anymore. Curiosity, maybe. Careful respect. She'd heard something that December night walking her fence line, even if she never said it plain. I said, "I know what people think when they hear Bigfoot." The word felt clean in the new green air, rain-washed, honest. "But I'm tired all the time, Nora. The contact wasn't a trophy. It was a debt I can't pay back." The rain smell rose warm from the dirt, mixing with the coffee, with the old wood of the porch. Somewhere deep in the timber beyond her field, 2 whoops sounded, faint and far, stacking on each other and falling away like a question asked and answered. Nora went completely still, cup halfway to her mouth. We didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The porch boards ticked with temperature change. I let the sound be a goodbye I didn't earn, a closing I hadn't asked for. The wind chimes hung motionless, not even a breeze to stir them. Before I left, I took one of the river stones from the basket without asking, slipping it into my pocket. I never told her why. She never asked. Now, years later, sitting in a quiet room with the tape hiss rising from memory, I keep the feather wrapped in a paper towel in a cigar box on the closet shelf. The old phone with the 20-second clip sleeps in a drawer I rarely open. I won't post it online. Won't feed the forums and the skeptics and the believers who want proof more than they want truth. Won't turn a sacred moment into entertainment. When I say Bigfoot now, I say it like I'm remembering a person who looked at me once and chose not to be more than a rumor. The porch light in that memory is always amber. The air is always cold enough to make truth visible in breath. I still wake some nights with the smell of wet bark rising from the hallway, and the house waits with me, patient, listening, remembering. If I go to the door now, I don't open it. I press my palm to the wood and listen to the silence that learned my name. The tape hiss gets louder in those moments, drowning out the reasonable explanations, the logical denials. It wasn't a dream. It was a warning that some things are bigger than proof, that some encounters ask for silence instead of celebration. And I still hear the 3 knocks. Not every night, not even every month. But sometimes when the wind drops and the dark presses close, they come, soft, spaced, patient, like someone checking to see if I remember. I do. I always will. That's the real weight of meeting Bigfoot. Not the fear, not the wonder, but the permanent responsibility of keeping the secret.